Hello, and welcome to another episode of Balanced Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Kristina Hess is a premier health coach and licensed dietitian and nutritionist with a functional and integrative approach to health. Kristina is especially passionate about leveraging a clean, cyclical ketogenic diet to treat inflammation and restore metabolic health. She utilizes nutrigenomics data and other lab tests to personalize nutrition plans and also incorporates EFT, mindful eating, the tiny habits method, and heart math to improve psychology and behavior around food. Kristina has a master's degree in clinical nutrition and integrative health from the Maryland University of Integrative Health. She is the host and founder of the Keto Symposium, the first ever low-carb conference in New York, which occurred in September of 2022. The symposium featured some of the top low-carb researchers in the world, including several of our former guests, including Nina Teicholz, Ben Azadi, Dr. Tro and Rosette Kalajian, Cynthia Thurlow, and Robert Sykes, among others. You can find Kristina Hess on Instagram at Kristina Hess Nutritionist and at www.theketonutritionist.com. Kristina Hess, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Balanced Body Radio.
Hello, Casey Ruff. Good to be here.
It's so great to have you. I am really hoping that we can summon your inner teacher to help us understand nutrigenomics. I could barely pronounce the word in the introduction, and understanding something that seems very complex and complicated. I'm so excited for you to introduce that kind of concept to our audience. But I do want to talk first about the symposium. What was it like to organize a trade show? That's crazy.
Oh my goodness. So the Keto Symposium was originally slated to happen in 2020, and we all know what happened.
What happened?
The
What happened?
pandemic.
Oh, nobody told me.
Right. So Keto Symposium, really the planning for it was a 3-year venture. And it was originally also slated to be in my home state of Connecticut, not New York City, but people wanted it to be in New York City, advocated for New York City. So we pivoted to New York City, which is a little crazy because New York City is the land of the vegans. It really is a heavy vegan city. I don't know if it's all the models that live there. But it's even part of their policy, the meatless Mondays and all that. So yeah, New York is it's a tough city to break into for an event, a low carb event. And but the event itself was beautiful. We had amazing talks. Just like such a fantastic lineup. We had great vendors, and although the attendee, the group was small, it was small but mighty. So lots of engagement, and people loved it. People absolutely loved it. And it was just a passion project. It wasn't anything I benefited from financially at all.
Wow.
So
That's amazing. Wow. That's amazing. So I've been to 2 low carb conferences. One was Low Carb Denver 2020. That was the weekend that everything shut down. So you can imagine how bizarre that was. And then we just had Keto Salt Lake here in April of 2022. And I love going to these conferences. It's so amazing to be there, to meet my heroes. Like, these are my heroes, like Ben Azadi, Cynthia Thurlow. Like to be there and meet Nina Teicholz would have been absolutely incredible. It's so cool to be there, but I'm used to it's kind of like a ballroom and like a big hotel and kind of a conference-y kind of a feel. And from the pictures of your event, it looked like, did you guys have like a fireplace there? Like, it looked like so intimate and small. It looked amazing.
It was held actually in a very iconic location in the Bruno Walter Auditorium at Lincoln Center. So, Lincoln Center is where the Metropolitan Opera and the ballet and everything. So it was a smaller theater in the back, part of the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, right next to the Juilliard School, where the top artists, study their craft. So the location couldn't have been more amazing. Yeah, but it did have that intimate, cozy, around the hearth kind of feel.
So cool. I absolutely love it. And so you would call the event a success?
Oh, 100%. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. And one of my favorite things, and I encourage your audience to check out, is the upcoming docu-series called Cancer Revolution. it is going to be amazing. They are submitting their film to Sundance Film Festival in your
My
neck of the
backyard.
woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, just the 15 minutes that we got to watch, because we got to see the premiere of those 15 minutes, was so special. Maggie Jones's story, her personal story of being given 6 months to live, and then and throwing up the pictures of the tumors that were all over her body, and then just to see her now 3 years later on stage with her husband, having produced this beautiful film with featuring the top cancer docs. I know you've interviewed Professor Thomas Seyfried and multiple others, plus the testimonials of the survivors who've used a ketogenic diet as a protocol, dietary protocol, to overcome really aggressive cancers, glioblastoma, HER2 positive, metastatic breast cancer, just really, really just the worst of the worst cancers. And I
Wow.
mean, the audience was in tears by the end, just, happy tears, but that was beautiful to get to experience that premiere at the event too.
That's incredible. Wow. Yeah, I think I saw the preview of that premiere, and I only saw it because I was looking into you in the symposium that was going on. And yeah, to see former guest Thomas Seyfried and Travis Christofferson and like this very beautifully done, well
Yes.
shot, well produced. You can tell, and you're right. Like to have the anecdote and the story with the hard science will be absolutely incredible. I hope that movie does amazing in Sundance, and I hope a lot of people see it. It's something that's really near and dear to my heart because my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer in 98, I want to say, and we just, did what we should have done, which is double down on a low fat diet. And you could always find low fat, no fat products around the house and lots of licorice and Snackwell's crap and all that stuff. And I mean, you can imagine what her journey with cancer was like. It didn't end very well 7.5 years later. And so to be able to
Mm.
see that alternative and to see that message being shared with other people makes me so hopeful that same fate that my mom had will not continue with more and more people out there, because it is tragic.
It is. I'm so sorry that your mom, went through that. And it's unfortunate that it isn't yet mainstream for a ketogenic diet to be just the automatic recommended protocol, despite all the studies. Just the other day, actually, I was with a client of mine whose mother has glioblastoma, and I showed her. I just pulled up PubMed and I showed her. I said, look at all the papers, okay? And she's like, I don't know if my mother's going to be willing. And that's a huge piece of it, don't you think? Right? It's, you got to be willing, and you got to want to live and make the changes and give up your sugar.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And it's tough that more people go down that path of chronic disease. First of all, it is the information and getting the information. I think now, like, the information's getting out there a little bit more, but that does put, the responsibility on people to do what they will with that information. And I do hope more people choose that with any chronic disease. But yeah, it's tough out there. People have the deck really stacked against them. And I see it every time I drive down the street and see the soda store, and it's
Mm-hmm.
the line that wraps around the building to sell buckets of soda with extra flavors and all kinds of stuff. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And I'm on a mission, sort of on as a side project too, to try to just change hospital food, because our sick care system, the food has to be a piece of it. We have wonderfully trained doctors who are then recommending eat whatever.
Yeah. No, it's
It's
crazy.
not right. It's
I
not.
do want to I want to hear your story, but since you mentioned it, let's just talk about that for a second. I laugh, and it's not funny, but I don't know how else to react to it. Tell your story about the processed food that you found in the hospital.
Oh, goodness sakes. Okay, well, so this story is it. 10 years apart. My mother's had a bunch of health challenges, how I ended up in the nutrition space in the first place. But so she ended up in the hospital with diverticulitis. And some of the food that she was given, like when she was able to eat again after 4 days of antibiotics and not even allowed to have ice chips, she was given sugar water, high fructose corn syrup with red food dye in water with a peel back plastic cup. And I about just I lost my mind. I wasn't even a nutritionist then, and I lost my mind. And so it was a bit of a catalyst. It was just one of a few things that happened that spurred me to change my career. And then 10 years later, she ends up having a flare, ends up in the hospital again, concurrently with some heart issues. And the food, so her flare wasn't so bad. I don't know why they let her eat, but they were giving her food because they were more treating her for her heart. And so they were very concerned about the sodium content, like the sodium content for the heart. But they're giving her processed everything. I mean, frozen pancakes with pretend maple syrup. Again, the corn syrup is the first ingredient. And again, like I shouldn't be laughing either, but it's just, yeah, what do you do? And I saved it because it's all food that's going to live right in a
it'll be fine. Yeah,
it'll be fine. Won't grow mold, nothing. So I have this container of food it's dressing, it's the really crappy mayonnaise, it's for the sandwich, it's the muffin that's in a package that will be preserved for another 5 years.
Can't make this stuff up.
It's just awful. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows it's the case. Everyone, has visited some person in a hospital at some point in time. And they know that the big food companies sponsor the vending machines that are there, and that the cafeterias there don't really have great food to offer, even just visitors. Now, some hospitals do have, I guess, chefs and nice things that they can prepare and cook, and other hospitals don't. And at the end of the day, I guess it's a business issue. It's a bottom line issue, just like in a supermarket, the stuff that's in the aisles, it's going to expire. So the big companies that are making big money have food that doesn't go bad that quickly. That's all the garbage food that we really shouldn't be eating, but that's giving the sickest people who need to get well. So it's
ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm thinking about Gary Fettke, who went to trial essentially for just trying to get sugar out of the hospital, and it was nearly impossible. And he went under investigation for 4.5 years. Totally crazy.
Well, it's really unfortunate because doctors, even just from my one ranty post about it, that I put out on Facebook and YouTube, the doctor friends of mine messaged me privately to say, thanks for speaking. We all know about this, but we can't, our hands are tied because we would actually lose our jobs. Like we'd lose our affiliation with the hospital. And a couple of them have tried to speak up about making changes. And the thing is they get shut down by operations, these administrators who have budgets and things like that. But I don't understand. There are good companies, like a Primal Kitchen, for example, right? Mark Sisson's company that ended up getting bought out, but I don't know who bought that out. But at least we know that the ingredients are quality ingredients. And I have no affiliation to Primal Kitchen. I'm just saying there need to be more companies like that are mission driven to have good ingredients that are packaged and safe for people, for places like a hospital to have them on hand.
Yeah, totally. No, he took a lot of criticism for kind of selling to the company. I want to say it was Kraft, but I could be wrong about that. But I saw it as a really good sign that big companies know that people care about this kind of stuff, And if they're willing to expand that market in a way that Mark Sisson is not able to do himself, like that's great. That's a really good thing. At least there's some demand there. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
so sad.
and then the distribution is good, and you can find the
Yeah.
product anywhere, and then the cost will ultimately come down. And I don't see why, at least in a hospital, why they can't carry, even if it's real maple syrup, right? Vermont maple syrup. Why can't you carry something real? Why do you need the packaged corn syrup? Um, I just, that kind of thing, or just plain olive oil for dressing,
Right.
with a little slice of lemon. Why do you need to have the craft package with the
Yeah,
soybean oil and the sugar and the ingredients? And it
totally.
doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense. And even just to have the option to choose is
Yeah.
amazing. And I have to say, if you're listening and not watching, you're missing out an amazing background behind Kristina in Vermont on location. Let's get some of that maple syrup going. It looks absolutely beautiful
I
over
should
there.
have done the call outside. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go back and tell your story about your journey to health. It sounds like you had to make a pivot, and having your mom be unwell was a big part of that.
Yeah, mom was unwell, was a huge driver to that. And just because of her health issues, I was very cognizant of, trying, at least doing my best to be healthy from a young age, except, I was following all the fads too, the low fat, no fat time, and made a lot of errors. It really wasn't until I got into CrossFit in my 30s and kind of pivoted to a paleo diet and experienced all kinds of amazing results from that, because prior to that I had experimented with vegetarianism and become a vegan, and then I had fractured bones as a result of that. So yeah, my body completely fell apart. And again, it was all in the name. It wasn't out of a, I love animals. I have two dogs. They're sleeping here right next to me, but it wasn't out of that. It was, I wanted to be my healthiest self. That's always been a very high value to me. And but man, employing the wrong strategy, and that's why I'm so passionate about the nutrigenomics now, because when someone's experimenting, like really trying with a whole bunch of different protocols and plans, and really just wants to be their healthiest self, and then that the wrong strategy ends up being a disaster for your body, that's really, it's not just soul crushing, but it really like hurts you physically, you
Yeah.
know so um yeah, I used to be an educator. I was a school teacher for 11 years, and then I switched over to nutrition, and there are a lot of similarities, in the profession. So yeah, I do consider myself to have the heart of a teacher, and I like to really impart knowledge. So
Yeah, that's amazing. How did you learn about low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets to begin with?
so I probably, it was actually through podcasting, because because podcasts. So I yeah, I first learned about it back in 2012. And oh, sorry, my internet connection is unstable. Um, so 2012, it was probably the Ben Greenfield Fitness podcast.
Yeah.
And then, and I know he went through his whole like 1 year deep experiment in deep ketosis and doing Ironman and stuff. Now at the time I was listening to all that and going, that sounds really just way too hard for me to do. So fast forward to 2017, I'm at a nutrition conference. The spotlight, the theme was cancer. I was about to start work inside of an oncology practice in Manhattan, and it was Dr. Seyfried's talk on ketogenic metabolic therapy. Otto Warburg, all the, just the mitochondrial theory of how cancer happens. That it just it just opened my mind, just made my head explode, basically. Like, what? and
Wow.
the pictures, the before and after pictures. So his so so yes, I knew about keto, I knew about low carb. I didn't really understand it. I didn't really understand it, and I didn't understand how feasible it was to live a low carb lifestyle. I didn't really understand that it's really a metabolic state. I was not taught that, really. We touched on it in school. You'd be surprised, how little you learn about. Okay, you learn about beta oxidation, and you learn it's just so touched on how actually important that whole metabolic flexibility thing is.
Yeah.
and and how reasonable and doable, and actually how natural it is, and why
Yeah.
we actually should live in this state more of the time than we do not. So thank you, Dr. Seyfried. He was the one. He was the one
He's
who
Yeah. What is he like on stage? Does he get as fired up when he's on stage as he does like when he's getting interviewed?
he he is so passionate. He is Yeah, he is so fired up. He's so passionate. He's a great engaged speaker. He's a great teacher, and he can teach this very complex cancer topic as if he's, like engaging. If you can teach it to a kindergartner, you've got your stuff nailed. I mean, I
Yeah.
really understood what he was saying. He didn't get like too bogged down in all this science, and he just really has a knack for explaining it in a beautiful way. And I was enthralled. I mean, I was really
Wow.
enthralled. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. His rants are my favorite. We just interviewed him for the second time recently, and I kind of forgot this. He worked with George Cahill way back in the day on some of the. I don't think he worked directly on some of Cahill's fasting studies, but there's some of the best, most elegant done studies about what happens to the body and the energy systems when somebody's fasting. And you were right about like textbooks and stuff talking about ketosis. There's one sentence in this giant nutrition manual that I have to pass to say I'm a nutritionist every year. There's a sentence that says when your body burns fat, your body enters into a state of ketosis and makes ketones. That's it. That's all it says in there. And it's like, why isn't the Cahill study in there? If you put that in there, you would know more about nutrition than anything. You wouldn't even need this whole book. It's really staggering, but I'm glad we have that in common. And he really is a wonderful man.
He is. I'm gonna get to meet him soon. I'm super
Ah,
excited.
that's so awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. What a cool introduction and way to find a ketogenic diet. What we know that low carbohydrate diets pretty much, I would say across the board, some version of a low carbohydrate diet. I've yet to find somebody who doesn't thrive. That said, there's lots of different ways to do a ketogenic diet. So what were some of the ways that you experimented with yourself personally, and what did you find to be the best for you?
Oh, best for me is it's definitely slightly leaner proteins, a lot more veg, and some color. So I have to rotate through not I cycle. I do carb cycle because I'm perimenopausal, and after 5 years of doing ultra low carb, I lost my period and I wasn't quite ready for that. So by including more starchy vegetables again, like going more paleo, if you will, going back to that really works well for me. So low to no dairy and more colorful foods works really well for me.
Yeah,
So now some people feel amazing, 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 and do amazing with those, fattier meats. And that's it's not how I feel my best, but I do love them. I do love them. I
sure.
love a good ribeye. I love my bacon, and but yeah, I can't do too much of that.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize this is the best thing for me. It's so
Right.
important to consider that. And it's what makes nutrition coaching so fun and so frustrating all at the same time, is you're trying to diagnose different things with different people. And, I've settled out really well into a carnivore diet for myself personally. Like I can do, I just ate 10 eggs tonight. I can do a pound and a half of, probably ground beef. I just bought a quarter of a cow, which I'm super excited about. I can eat that. That's my food and I'm good. And so when people approach me and they want to learn the carnivore way, my stupid carnivore brain just says, oh, just do what I do. And this is fine. And one example, a guy hired me about a month or two ago. We've done a few sessions and it's not working. And I hate it. It's not working for him. His digestion is still not great. He's not craving the kinds of foods I'm telling him to go towards. And so we're going to have to make a pivot. We're going to have to change and introduce plant foods. And again, in my brain, I want to say that whatever worked for me and works for me and works for a lot of people out there doesn't always work for everybody. So in that context, how would you explain nutrigenomics, and how did you find that world of nutrigenomics to begin with?
I found it at graduate school, and then I had to continue studying after, right? Because I only touched on it a little bit in school, and then I decided to really start incorporating it into my practice. That it was I just see it as the future of nutrition, and I think eventually it's going to be standard for everyone to consider this piece, the way we slap on a CGM, the way we look at other functional labs. Looking at those gene SNPs is going to be an important consideration for what direction to go in. And the thing is to understand about the genes that we're looking at in nutrition is that they are low penetrance genes. They are not really high impact genes. And so you have to look at them together in pathways and in family groups so that they can tell you a story. But you don't just look at one variant. So when you're looking at genes, you're looking at spelling changes. It's kind of like my example for that is, okay, if you have the words boat, coat, and goat, you've changed one letter, right? But changing that one letter completely changes the meaning of the word, like a lot. So when you have different variants, like we all do, so you and I are 99.9% the same. All of it, the human race, 99.9% the same, but in the 0.1, we have 3 to 4 million different variations.
Wow.
So it creates this sort of uniqueness that we do need to consider. And what's interesting is that it can either provide a lot of validation for something you already know and say, okay, wow, I guess this really explains like why this works, or why I crave this, or why I'm so anxious, or why X, Y, Z, or why my body responds really well to this type of exercise and not so much this one, or why I have a tendency to get injured. Like they're just different things, right? Because the same thing in fitness too. People in fitness, maybe they have their whole plan, it's on an app or something, and then one person gets all the results, they have the before and after pictures, and then the other person is like, that doesn't work for me. Why? Or they do the same program and they end up with all kinds of, injuries, and they needed more recovery, and they needed to supplement a different way. They needed more protein, so it does get tricky. And what I love about it is, while it's not the be all end all, it's not the answer to all your questions, I just find that with this, like low carb, even in carnivore, Casey, even the carnivores have their own different, you can get little niches within carnivore. You've got your Paul Saladino carnivore, right? Who's eating fruit and honey. And then you've got a carnivore who's eating like a Dr. Kilt's carnivore. He's eating heavy cream, and he's making his special ice cream. He made it at Keto Symposium. And so there's dairy in his program. So there's a variation even within just carnivore. So imagine you expand it to low carb, and then who can get into ketosis? Some people can get into ketosis at 75 grams, 65 grams, 50. Some people have to go down to 10. So it doesn't matter sometimes if you're in ketosis or not. And so it's this huge spectrum of a possibility, really.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Okay. I love that you said this is telling us a story. I love that. It's not that this means this and this means this and then never eat this. It's just this is giving us clues. And it takes somebody like you, a health coach with a lot of experience and also using other tools to be able to piece that together, almost like you're, making a defense case or something in a trial. Like it's just more evidence that's suggesting a certain way. And that's how you approach it.
That's exactly right, because there, when you just collect a bunch of data on a person, you still don't know them, right? So I can look at a report, and if I don't know this person at all, I say, wow, I see a lot of tendencies for X, Y, Z, right? Like possibility. There's potential and possibility. It does not mean that's expressing. So now I have to meet with you, the person, the actual human being, and ask a lot of questions too. Is this showing up for you? Here's where, and they may, oh yes, this is like this. Oh yes, I do have a gout in my family, or I do have yes, macular degeneration. Okay, well, we need to work on protecting your eyes, and we need to work on protecting your DNA repair. Here it is. Here's where I can show you exactly. So, but you need that clinical correlation with the person. And then in an ideal situation, you're marrying it with other labs and other information, right? Because let's say your client who you've told to eat steak and eggs. Well, there's certain gene SNPs to look at for that. And you can put a glucose monitor on them, because there are gene variants where they may have an insulin reaction, right? What I mean is their blood glucose is going to elevate when they have those foods. It's a stress response, and you can correlate that to a CGM. But wouldn't it be nice to triangulate the information? And so the person's telling you, you know what? I don't actually crave that. I don't feel good on that. Okay, the genetics are lining up. Oh, and the blood glucose monitors showing a stress response. How weird. Okay, I guess you're not made for this. Let's pivot. And then you're really working with something actionable, as opposed to just throwing darts at a dartboard.
Yeah. Wow. That is so interesting. I'm curious, like, since you've done this for as long as you have, and you're able to kind of read some of these things, are you able to kind of blow people's minds by saying like, oh, I'll bet you do X, Y, and Z. I'll bet you feel this way after this. Like I used a metabolic cart for over a decade, and it was funny. Like people would come in, and I could see them walking towards me, and just by their look or whatever, I could say, okay, I'm pretty sure you eat this many calories. I'm pretty sure you need a nap every afternoon. I'm pretty sure you get sick twice a year. And they'd be like, wow, like kind of
How do you know that?
Nostradamus in a weird way. Yeah. Do you get the same thing?
I don't know. I don't know if I would like sometimes, yeah, sometimes there's just huge, yeah. Even before they meet with me, when they get their report first, because they get to read it. It's 80 pages. And they're like, wow, that's so insightful. That is
Wow.
so interesting. But now what do I do with this? Right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of information here. What is the most important stuff that I need to pull out? What should I do with it? Where do I go from here?
Yeah.
That's be the most helpful.
Interesting.
And then there's some stuff where they're like, should I panic about this? Should I worry about this? And it's like, no, no.
Yeah, so interesting. I go back to what you said before, like validation. I think that would be a really interesting thing, and probably one of the biggest benefits is that validation of like, yeah, I always kind of thought I needed to eat, I don't know, lots of vegetables, but didn't really work out for me, but I
Right.
still did it because everybody said to do it. So I find that very interesting. How did we learn all of this stuff? If we've got so many different variances, who figured this out? How do we figure this out?
So that's a great question. Well, the Human Genome Project was a huge 13, 14-year project that started in the 90s and it was completed around 2003. And so it's basically a map of the human body, and it's correlated to, so let's say, vitamin A does XYZ and it's on these pathways and it has these outcomes in the body. Well, what are the genes that are mapped to vitamin A? That's, so that's how that got figured out. So it's basically like mapping the whole body genetically. Took many, many years, and it was a multi-country whole thing. So yeah, it was a big endeavor. 23
Wow.
countries, I think, were involved. So once that was done, then the studies started, being done. So what's really also frustrating about even the genetic piece is that we're still a lot to learn. It's still a very new thing. So I'm constantly in student mode, if you will, because I don't know everything, and there's new things coming out all the time.
Wow.
And so what we'll know again 30, 40, 50 years, it'll be light years from what we know now.
So interesting. I mean, the only thing I've ever heard about that was having to do with cancer research, like we were talking about before, and ending this whole thing ending up as like a big flop for cancer research. And you're right, like we may still learn tons of stuff from that. It might end up not being a flop, but that's the only thing I've ever heard from it. It didn't occur to me that we could go and learn all kinds of other things. It's like with like the gut health and probiotics. There's one thing I know for sure, and that is that it's really important, and that's the only thing I know about it. And it's so complex and complicated, and there's so many different storylines out there. It's really hard to decipher, the truth. But maybe we can use an example. So something, kind of related, like ApoE4. If you've been in the low carbohydrate world, you probably heard of ApoE4. Can you explain like what that is and what that tells us, and who would be at maybe a higher risk or a lower risk?
Right. So, well, first, can I just address the whole like cancer thing? I mean, I
Yeah.
think genetics is confusing because you've got three big buckets for genetics. You've got ancestry. You've got these, okay, there's a disease, like you actually have a very serious disease where you don't, convert a nutrient or something, and so there are geneticists trying to tackle a disease. Cancer is really activated as because of metabolic issues that, but there's no this idea that there are cancer genes, that oncogenes, it no. I mean, uh, maybe there's a list of things that get activated, but it's really important to know that your diet is the single biggest expressor of your genes. And other factors are super important, environmental factors. So it could be molds in the environment, it could be just how you handle and perceive stress. It could be I mean, pick anything. Are you sleeping, not sleeping? All these lifestyle factors are actually huge. That's really what is acting on your genetic expression. And that is where nutrigenomics lives. So nutrigenetics is what are the actual variants? Okay, what are your spelling changes? That's nutrigenetics. Nutrigenomics is what can I do to influence it? What are the things that I can do to alter my expression or improve the expression, optimize that genetic profile? Where do I need support? Where do I need supplements? What is it that I need? That's nutrigenomics. So the nutrigenetics piece is like, okay, I've got this ApoE4. All right, so ApoE 3, 4 or 4, 4, you get one copy from mom, one copy from dad. The ApoE4 is the oldest version of the ApoE gene. So it conferred a lot of benefits way back when, especially fertility in cold weather. So like really northern climates that we could reproduce. Unfortunately, that ApoE4 today does not confer the same benefits because it is not adapted to our modern food. And as we know, 10,000 years ago, we went through the agricultural revolution. We started, farming and domesticating animals, and our diet changed considerably. And the ApoE4 is really kind of that hardcore hunter-gatherer gene. And it is a higher impact gene. It's not it's not set in stone destiny, but it is a higher risk marker for Alzheimer's. It's one of the cholesterol genes. It has been shown that someone who say drinks alcohol even once a week, once a month, is increasing their risk for Alzheimer's by 23%.
Wow.
With that profile. Yeah. So it's really just not adapted to our modern lifestyle. So it's a higher impact gene. It's actually the very first thing that I look at on the report. So it is an important gene to take into consideration. But again, you want to look at it in a story with the other ones. So when people say, okay, ApoE, you can't have saturated fat, that is not true. You want to look, because it's a hunter-gatherer gene, well, maybe it's super adapted to saturated fat. So you got to look at all the other fat oxidation genes. And those genes are hard. Those are hard ones to read. And that's where the, going and looking at the low carb, it's tricky.
Yeah.
And there are, beneficial keto genes, and some people have issues with that. And so they don't feel so good when they're fasting. Their blood sugar really, really spikes when they're fasting. And so for those folks, it actually is better to have, the 3 meals a day and not do something like OMAD. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So with epigenetics in particular, I remember the saying, like, your genes load the gun, but they don't pull the trigger. Is that safe to say here? Is like, yeah, you
totally,
have
like
risk.
Your lifestyle is actually, yeah. So how you choose to live influences. I mean, even just this week, I met with someone who has, Hashimoto's, another person who has another autoimmune disease, another person who has ulcerative colitis, and these things don't come out of nowhere. It's not that they come out of nowhere. And someone may say, oh, this runs in my family, right? Like, my mother had this, my grandmother. Well, it's like, okay, what are you guys eating? How are you guys living? What are the environmental factors? Let's start to piece together a story to figure out where it all ties together genetically. Because,
Wow.
okay, there is a predisposition to activate it, but what are you doing to activate it? Because that is where the secret sauce is. That's where you have the power. There's always empowerment with knowing what your genetic profile is so that you can act upon it.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That's so well explained. I really appreciate that. I love that we can use that data to drive decisions, and people can always make decisions. They find out that we're at high risk and they don't care. They're going to keep drinking or doing whatever they probably shouldn't do, but at least they know. At least they have the ability. I think empowerment is a perfect word to use. That does sound extremely empowering. You mentioned some of the low impact genes that are nutrition related. You do such a good job explaining this on your website, which I definitely recommend clicking around on the website for the listener. You did a really nice job. And there was that section that shows, like, vegetables, fiber, types of fats. Can you explain some of those that are kind of key and some of the other ones that you look at quite a bit?
So one of the key families for for what we love to do, which is a low carb ketogenic plan, is PPAR, PPAR. This whole family, PPAR alpha, there's PPAR gamma, there's a whole bunch of them, and they're all correlated to fat oxidation. It's not the only thing to look at, but specifically for ketone production and for fasting, that is a very important one to look at. And there's things that you can do. I'll give you a very specific one, which is to take L-carnitine to improve your PPAR. It's a very important nutrient that shuttles fatty acids into the mitochondria so that you can do beta oxidation efficiently. So if you feel really out of gas when you go ultra low carb, you probably need a boost in L-carnitine and aren't as efficient, and maybe do have some variance there in your PPAR.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. So when you're looking at all of these things together, what are some of the surprising changes that you have to make for some people?
Surprising changes. Yeah. I mean, if someone's doing like lots of dairy, so you'll love this one. This pretty much 75% of the global population does not have the genetic adaptation to tolerate dairy.
75.
75 of the world. Yeah.
Wow.
The whole globe is not adapted, genetically speaking. Like, our genes are very slow to change, right? Very slow to change. And we just don't, because even consuming dairy, like another animal's milk, is still pretty new relative to how long we've been on the planet. There are very few of us that are adapted for dairy. And I think that is the easiest thing to learn, right? On the report, it's, do I tolerate dairy or I don't? Because dairy can be super inflammatory for a person if they're not supposed to, consume it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a very easy one. That's like a pretty hard line in the sand on the report. Do you have,
yes or no?
It's a yes or no. It's a yes or no. Now, if you are, mixed on that, then maybe you have to do more. Let's do minimize it. Maybe it's more sheep and goat. Maybe it's, do some experimentation with that. Maybe you also want to do a food sensitivity test. But that's low hanging fruit to really, really know. Another one that people love to argue about is coffee, right? Caffeine.
Yeah.
Caffeine specifically. So caffeine clearance is an easy yes or no in the detox pathway. And some people, the people who say coffee is bad for you, are usually the ones who are slow metabolizers, who get the heart palpitations. They feel bad. They say, don't drink it. It's terrible for you. And it's terrible for them. It really is legitimately, yes. If you are a slow metabolizer, you do not garner any health benefits from caffeine. And if you are a fast metabolizer, then yes, now there's still an upper limit. You don't want to overdo it, but you will actually have those liver protecting benefits. You can utilize those antioxidants. Great. Totally different. Two different things, and both valid.
Wow. Wow, that's so interesting. So what kind of test does somebody have to do to get all of this done? Because I'm aware there's lots of different genetic tests that you can get done. Is there a specific one that you recommend or that you work with?
Yeah. So there's the one that I use. It's on my website in the shop. You just click the link for it. It's called the Nutrition Genome. It's great. You get a beautiful 80-page report with it. Tons of data backed up with lots of studies. You don't have to meet with me to get the test. You can order it on your own. It's just really nice, I think, to have it interpreted by somebody.
Yeah.
And like, what do I do with this now? That personally, if I was going to invest the money, the test costs $360. And then, and then there's the consult with me. It's a very reasonable investment in your health to just for a one-time thing to know. And it's something that you can do in addition to, someone who's working with you, someone who's working with another health practitioner. It's just a nice add-on thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I often lament that it's weird for some people to buy coaching, or they think that we're like gonna scam them over, or we're gonna sell them like this package of like, 3 sessions a week for the rest of their life for $1 million or whatever. And I wish more people would hire coaches, even just for a session or two, to ask questions, get some validation. Oftentimes I'm not even like coaching somebody. I know you're not either. You're just there to be a sounding board while
Yeah.
somebody is kind of like going through this themselves and giving themselves permission to do certain things. It's too bad that everybody's drawn towards like the next meal plan, the next exercise equipment or whatever, and they're less likely to hire a coach that's actually going to give them some insight and some simple tips that is going to be like maybe a skill that they'll learn that they can use for the rest of their life. It's too bad.
I think it's a very smart investment to invest in a good coach, because it is so hard to go things alone. We were not designed to go things alone. And just like you would reach out to a lawyer for your legal documents or an accountant for your taxes, like you want to have a good team. You formulate that tribe of the peeps, that you want to have on in your health corner. And I think it's supremely important, and everyone should invest in it.
Yeah, totally agree, especially if you've tried like a standard diet or a workout program and it didn't work because you followed somebody on Instagram. Like, vet out a coach. It doesn't have to be you or me or anybody else. Like, you can vet
Right.
them out and
It's
find
all
your
about
people.
like a good rapport. You got to actually like the person that you're
Yeah,
talking to, and then want to, check in with them.
totally.
That's a huge piece of it.
Huge. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's huge. I love that you include success stories on your website as well that are all very powerful. Maybe if you've got like one or two that really come to mind, they don't have to be the biggest ones. Maybe they can be more recent. What are some success stories that you really love and really
Aw.
appreciate?
Oh man. Oh, there. Okay. So one that I haven't featured yet, but she's going to get featured soon. And well, I'm really proud of this person, and I'm really excited for her. She not going to say any names. She was diagnosed with fibrosis of the liver, and it's been reversed. Like her liver is looks amazing. She's dropped 40 pounds. The inflammation she had, joint pain, her synthroid is being dialed down, like all kinds of amazing things, cascade of events. And I know that what people see, it's just the weight, but it's like all these labs. Like one of her doctors was like, I don't know, this is a bait, like what good news, just so her whole health team is happy, right? Just thrilled. And but man, she really really did the work, and it really was like all in for it, and super dedicated. So really happy for her. I mean, you've probably seen this too with all the people you work with. There's just amazing things that happen to the body. People come off blood pressure medication, or they've been on acid blockers for 20 years, and they like don't need that anymore. They're just not putting in all the assaults right anymore, and you can heal their gut. The person that, oh, there was a woman that was on Prozac for 20 years, got her off of that, but there was like a whole bunch of other stuff she had to work through in tandem with the therapist. But it was like that, when you're feeding your body really nutritious food, and you're taking some good supplementation to boost mood, and then you're doing the lifestyle pieces that also bring you, things that bring you joy. And maybe some people do need it, but maybe it's a person that doesn't need that, and and they're feeling better also because of it, it's hugely rewarding.
Wow.
And then a couple people that have lost over 100 pounds, it's always like, oh, that's so life-changing, right?
So
So
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it's so cool. And I love the way you kind of preface that by saying doing the work. We can give you the information, but we can't run your miles for you. We can't live your life. We can't make those choices. And at the end of the day, yeah, we can make this more simple for you, but it's not going to be easy. It will take some work, but you don't need to be discouraged by that. You just start by some small, simple steps. Those steps will improve over time. You'll get positive
totally.
feedback. Like, your health will come back. You'll be happier. Like, what a better reward. What better reward could you ask for?
Yeah, it's the best thing, and you also want to look at like your labs. I think it's so important for people to get regular lab work and not just focus on the scale, and know their insulin markers and their A1C and their, HSCRP and uh triglycerides. So important. Like these are really important. Homocysteine, like get these things tested, ask for your doctor for them. They might fight you on it a little bit, but advocate for yourself and just say, I'm looking to be my best and I want you to run these things and not just the standard labs, because they don't tell you the full picture either.
That's right. That's right. No, that's so smart and such great advice and a great way to conclude this conversation. Like, if you are struggling with your health, it is your responsibility and it's tough. Again, you are fighting a very uphill battle, but it's just like you with podcasts. Like, the information is out there and for free. We don't charge anybody to listen to this show. Nobody has to pay to access your free resources that you put on your website, which are amazing. And all the education there is somebody could just start with that and see tremendous results. Just the sample meal plan you have is absolutely amazing. You don't even charge for it. It's super cool. And yeah, again, it's going to be some work, but you know what? It's gonna be its own reward, and you're going to be healthier and happier. You're going to be around for loved ones. You're going to be able to play with your grandkids. It's so rewarding and such a fun journey to be on. Kristina Hess, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, thank you, Casey. Yeah, they can find me at theketonutritionist.com, or I'm on Instagram, Kristina Hess Keto Nutritionist, or Facebook. So
Awesome.
please connect with me there.
Cool. That's great. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so very much for putting your teacher hat back on for us and really educating us on such an interesting topic. And yeah, we've got a lot to learn. It's cool to know that we have a lot to learn. And even with what we know now, we're able to change lives, and you're changing lives all the time by using this information, which is so cool, and it'd be amazing to see how we advance this in the future. But yeah, really appreciate you and your work, and for taking the time to make sure that we're giving the right individuals the right information rather than saying one specific diet is the best for everybody. So, Kristina, thank you so very much for everything that you do. And thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on, Casey. Such a pleasure. Thank you so
It was
much.
such a pleasure. It was a real honor. And this has been another episode of Balanced Body Radio.